Okay, we're going to try and start making this bustier. I had purchased a container of 1/4-inch bias tape from one of the thrift stores, and I got started working on it this morning. And it was so old that all you had to do is touch it, and the black ink came off on my fingers. So I had to throw the whole thing away and cut my own bias tape. So when you're using your own bias tape, in this case we're going to use the same size. We're going to use the 1/4-inch bias tape. So when you cut your bias tape, cut whatever you want if you want a 1/4-inch to show on the outside of your bustier around your corset or bustier, then do 1-inch bias tape strips, because that will turn into 1/4-inch bias to go all the way around your bustier. When we sew this, we're going to sew it down here, and we're going to cut these ends off so they're flush with the edge. Then we're going to take another strip of bias, and we're going to go around the rest of it, and then we're going to tuck the ends in here so you don't see the raw edges. So that's basically the whole bustier. So I'm going to, before I start sewing on here for a 1/4-inch, I'm going to test my 1/4-inch on my sewing machine. Another thing, if you do save old needles, you should probably use one of your old sharps instead of using a new sharp, because you're going to dull it really badly on this vinyl. So you might as well use one of your old needles if you don't throw them away. I don't throw them away. I keep them just for situations like this, so that I can use them when I did my clippers. So I can use them like this when I need them. Okay, well, I don't know what happened to my nippers. They're probably somewhere around here. Okay, anyway, let's get started. So I'm going to test my machine for the stitching, and also for width away from the edge of the actual vinyl. So let's go ahead and put your machine down. I'm setting mine. I'm using a J presser foot, so I'm going to adjust my 1/4-inch to whatever my presser foot is, because I'm going to sew right along that edge. So just go ahead and do a few stitches. Okay, so then you can check your stitches, make sure they're your tension doesn't need to be adjusted since you're working on this vinyl. And you also want to test your distance from the edge. So let's see, here's 3, and then I'm going to go in there, and you'll see I'm right at that 1/4-inch mark. So I know that my setting is good for my 1/4-inch double fold bias tape. So if I wanted an inch to show on the outside, like say this was an inch and I wanted the whole inch on the bottom in bias tape, I would take 1 inch times 4, because your bias tape, your single fold bias tape is always times 4. So that would mean I would need 4 inches of bias tape. Say I wanted a 1/2 inch edging on here, I would take a 1/2 inch and times it by 4, and I would have to cut myself a 2-inch strip of bias tape. So if I did a 2-inch strip of bias tape, I'm going to have this much showing on, this is a 1/2 inch showing on the outside of so whatever you want your edge to be, times it by 4, and you'll get the right amount of bias tape. Okay, so our first step is going to be to find out how much bias tape you need. You're going to need at least 1 full piece of bias tape to get all the way around the outside of yours. So don't cut too much bias, because you do use a lot of fabric when you cut your own bias tape. So just go as little as possible that you need. And this piece here, we can use this to go down the edge. Okay, so let's just get started. We're going to sew on the right side. We're going to put our bias tape up against the edge like this, and we're just going to sew these together all the way down 1/4 inch. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, I hope I can help you can see. I'll get my hand out of the way in a minute. Okay, so we've got the bias tape on. We're just sewing it right along the edge with the vinyl. Okay, and let's just keep going. I'll get some speed here. And keep your edging right along with your foot. Twist it a little on me. Okay, so let's go ahead and cut that even. Same on the other side. Okay, so now we're going to turn it and we're going to tuck it. And how come that didn't work right? Did I use the wrong bias tape? Inch, 1/4, 1/4, 1/4. Oh, I don't know why that. I should have been able to go up and then tuck another one. Maybe that's more than 1/4 of an inch. Yeah, it is bigger than 1/4 of an inch. I'm way off. Okay, well, let's start over again, and we'll go with a smaller stitch next time. Well, no, I'm not going to do that. Okay, well, let's revamp. Okay, I had to stop that last video. I always sew wide. I should have cut my bias tape a little wider than I did. But anyway, I went ahead and cut myself some more bias tape, only this time I cut myself 1 1/8 instead of just a plain old inch. Do you see that little extra 1/8 of an inch there? It just helps on this vinyl, because that vinyl does have a tendency to really grab your fabric. But if you're really good at staying within that 1/4 of an inch, then you can go with the inch bias tape, but I'm not any good at it. Okay, so now we've got that first 1/4 of an inch sewed to the vinyl, and now we're going to lay it down, and we're going to, let me see if you can make sure you see. Okay, we're going to turn it, we're going to tuck it. I'll just do it up here so you can see it better. Okay, so we're going to tuck, and we're going to turn until we're right on that line of stitching. Do you see that? So it's basically the same way as using bias tape. You can put pins in here as long as you stay away from the vinyl, because you don't want that vinyl to have holes in it. So go ahead and tuck and turn. You're not going to get this messy black here on the vinyl like I did. It was my fault because I used this old bias tape, and it was just a mess. It got on everything. I should have just threw it away when I saw that it was going to start discoloring everything. Okay, now you have a couple options here. You can hand stitch this to, if you want a really soft look, if you're not doing this black fabric, and say you're doing a real soft pink and whatever, or like that white glitter over there, and you don't want any sewing to show on the front, you can hand stitch this. You can hand stitch it right to, take some thread and hand stitch it right to the top of that first line of stitching, and you're never going to even know that there was any stitching done there. You won't see anything from the front, is what I'm trying to say. So it's just, you know, something that you could keep in mind if you want to do something really soft and sweet. You can also do this with regular fabric. My only suggestion is, because it is a corset, that you either double up your fabric. In fact, I would double up my fabric, and then I would actually use some kind of maybe a iron-on stabilizer, a fusible stabilizer, or even just regular stabilizer, regular interfacing, just to give it some weight. Even if you do get pins in the front, you're never going to see them, at least not in the front, because you can't see anything through this. I've punched holes in this already, and tried to put in rivets and eyelets and all kinds of things, and once that hole's in, you can barely even see there's been a hole punched in there. Okay, so now we're going to fix this end. We're going to go ahead and sew this across, and I probably could have got by with that inch, but my tuck-in would have been really tiny, and it would have been hard to catch. So you can either sew from the front or you can sew from the back. We'll go ahead and sew from the front, because that way we'll be able to see what exactly we're doing. Okay, so let's get started on that. So now what I would do, I'm going to put because I'm using the J, let me show you the J foot. Probably it's standard, so everybody gets this when you get a machine. There's a little line there. That's where your middle on your stitching is. So I'm going to line up my machine to center. Okay, so there's my center stitch. So now I know that that line is going to be right dead center on that between my vinyl and my bias tape. So now I'm going to move it over 2 places. Okay, so now I'm going to get a really thin line of stitching right next to the edge. So let's see if you can see. Probably can't. Let me see if I can go down a little bit. Okay, so now I'm just like 2 millimeters away from that line of stitching. Okay, so you really do want to get up close and personal so you know what you're doing and seeing. Okay. Okay, so let's go ahead and take our needles out as we get to them, and make sure we keep that line in the middle. You don't have to be perfect. Nobody's going to see anyway, because it's black thread on black fabric. Okay, all right, so let's go ahead and make sure that our threads were caught on the back. There's nothing that wasn't caught. If it wasn't caught, you would be able to see more than likely the stitching. Okay, so let's go ahead and cut these flush. We're not going to tuck anything. We're going to tuck the one that would come up the other way. We're going to finish that off so we don't have any raw edges. Okay, so there is that. All right, so there is the bottom of our bustier with the black bias tape.